In this video, we are going to become masters of our own domains, or at least masters of the mastering plugins here in Cubasis 3. So let's go. Hi, my name is Pete and welcome to Studio Live. Today, where my goal is to help you create, record and release your best music, we are here in Cubasis 3 and it is the end. We are here doing our final mix and our final master for this track, which apparently we're just going to tap on random tracks here and mess up. So we've done the recording, we've written this song, we've mixed it, we've mastered, well, we haven't mastered it, we've mixed it, we've got to our final mix. We did have a bit of a play around in the previous episode and we added in some stuff, but you know what? I'm going to remove these. I'm going to tap them, we're going to get rid of them, and we're going to start from scratch here with our mastering. So I've got to remember how to remove a track. I think we select it like this and we go nothing like this, yeah? None. So let's do this. We'll remove the effects that we have there and we're going to start from absolute scratch here. So we'll take off that one. We'll take off this Roomworks reverb that we put on there. And now we are completely clean. Now, the good thing about Cubasis is when we're mastering a track in Cubasis, we don't even have to export it. We can do our master right on our master bus because we have a master bus. Unlike many other platforms, GarageBand included, that do not have this master bus. So what we can actually do is tap on the effects button here in the master bus. And what we have on by default is we've got a brick wall. Now this is a brick wall limiter that sits there after the final fader. And this is important because this we can turn on to make sure that things are not going to go up above 0 dB. So we can actually dial this in. We can tell it what threshold we want it to be. We can add a release time here. And then this will actually be the final gatekeeper. Now, I don't tend to put things up to 0 dB on my threshold on a master. I tend to put them around about here, around the minus 0.1 or even a little bit more, just minus 0.5, just to give us a little more headroom. So let's turn this on because I've never actually used this. Yeah, full disclosure, this is my first time mastering in Cubasis, but we're going to work on it together. So let's hit the button on this one and we'll play the track and we'll take a listen and I'll turn this limiter on and off and we'll see if this is actually going to do anything to our track before we actually add anything to our final channel strip here. So we'll hit play. That's with our brick wall limiter on, with it off. So it's not doing anything yet. Why? Why is it not doing anything? Well, because our final mix isn't getting up that loud. It's not actually getting up to 0 dB. So the way we've mixed this is we've left ourselves what we call some headroom. Headroom is important because of what we're going to do now, which is add in our master channel strip here. So if we tap the effects button, we tap add. Now it's actually on here by default. When you come in here, not to that one, but to these ones, to our internal effects, you've got your standard channel strip there, but you've also got this one, the master strip. And this is on your master channel by default. Now at the moment, it's basically doing nothing because we've got a multi-band compressor here that we can make some changes on. We've got a stereo imager here and we've got a loudness maximizer. Once again, haven't read the manual and haven't used these before, but we're going to find out what they do together. So we'll turn it off and then we'll just turn it on and it should really do not much because all we've got is this loudness maximizer. So it's not doing any compression, it's not doing any stereo imaging, it is just the loudness. So we'll hit play and I'll turn this on and we'll take a listen to what it does.
Back in 1985, late for class, but feeling fine 'cause I have a rock and roll band.
So what is it doing here? Well, it's just bringing up our overall output. And you can see over on the side here, we've got this, which is our overall output meter. Now, the thing is, we can change this between classic and modern. We can set up how much of this. So this is our main dial here. And we've even got some soft clipping that we can add. Now, I don't tend to use any sort of clipping, even soft clipping. I find it a bit dangerous at the top end here in your mastering. So let's just hear the difference between classic and modern, shall we? So here's our classic loudness maximizer.
Got a call from my older friend, working on a way to bend the space.
So your classic is a sort of smoother kind of sound. The modern seems to give you more of that edge. And if you were doing like a big EDM track that you wanted to really crush, you'd probably go for that. So we're going to leave it on classic there. We're probably going to turn it down a little bit to start with because we don't want too much of this. So without anything on there.
Time continue on, but it all
You can see there that our peaks are only getting up to around -3, -4, which is probably not really enough headroom. Probably should have left myself a little bit more. We've probably mixed this a bit too loud, but we're learning. It's our first time. It's my first day. So we'll drive this up in a moment. But first, we want to look at some other things. We want to look at a multi-band compressor here and a stereo imager. So multi-band compression. So this is like a compressor. We can turn the compression up and down. We've got thresholds here and we've got ratios here and how much compression is going to be applied. We've also, though, the difference here, as opposed to your regular compressor where you've just got one dial, you've got 3 different bands that we can use here. So you can drive up your treble, you can drive up your mids, and you can drive up your bass. So there's 3 different spots that we can actually make changes here. So for this particular track, I probably want to compress a little bit of the bass, and I've got a lot of synth sounds, but to me it's a little bit top-endy at the moment, so I probably don't want the compression. I might even want to drop it down a little bit in the mids and maybe in the top end there. But yeah, you can play with these and play with the different ratios. So let's bring it all back to 0, and we're going to do this. So this is all of our sub bass below 150 hertz. The other thing we can do is grab these and change the windows. So for instance, I probably want to look at everything under 200 hertz here to start with. So this is going to be a real sort of bassy area here. So we'll leave this all around about the default settings, about 2.5 to 1 ratio, and we can play with this threshold and then turn this up and down. So to hear the effect, let's turn it up and then we'll adjust the threshold to see where it's actually kicking in. And we'll hit play on this one.
went so wrong, and I had to escape. Press the gas as I hit 88. Time that flies when you're having fun.
And you can actually see there with your metering, you can see how much it's actually doing with the little orange meter there. So if it's not doing anything, we're just seeing these blue meters here. And as it's actually starting to compress, we're actually seeing it kick in there with the orange meter. Let's take another look.
Sometimes feels you're the only one who knows how heavy it feels. Time that flies and you're out of here. One long pine and you disappear.
So you can see there that you've got control over the threshold, the ratio, and also that the amount there, the amount of dBs that are being pushed into there. So we'll probably leave it around about that. We'll just put it up like 2 dB, and then everything under 200 hertz. We'll set the threshold there and the ratio, and just give it a little bit of a gentle nudge.
Here you're done. 1.21.
Now these mids, you can see here with the threshold set, where they're already doing a little bit there. So we'll turn the threshold down on these mids and then see if there's any change that we need to make here.
Need to find my mom and dad and get them to the fish under the sea dance before we all fade away. Great Scott, this is gonna be tough.
So you can hear there that we definitely don't need anything there. We don't need any support there. And it's probably going to be the same sort of thing up here with our high end. And again, we can turn each of these off individually too by tapping there, tapping there, tapping there. And then we can just play around with these. So let's hit play again and play around with our treble.
The dark squad is pretty rough cause we need a lightning bolt. But my girlfriend had read.
A little bit up the top there actually isn't too bad. We don't want it to be all crispy sounding like this, but maybe we do want to just add a little bit of compression in that top end there. So let's just play this again.
Turn her number for me, and I now know my density.
Not bad. Let's jump into this chorus here, and what I'll do, we'll A-B this. I'll turn the multi-band compressor off, we'll turn it back on, and let's just hear, because the key thing with mastering is do no damage, yeah? You want to make sure that you're not actually hurting the final mix, and that's what we want to make sure we're doing here. So let's hit play, we'll turn this off, and then we'll turn it back on again. We'll start with it off, in fact, and then we'll turn it on and see what we've done.
Time that flies and it's time to run. Sometimes feels you're the only one who knows how heavy it feels.
Can you just hear how we're getting a little bit more in the way of dynamics in here? So it's giving it just that little bit of oomph that you want. Now keep in mind, you got to be careful because volume will do that too. So you don't want to just be going with, oh, if it's louder, then it's going to be better, because that's not always the case. So do take caution with this, but I'm pretty happy with that for now. The other thing that we did play around with earlier in the series is the factory presets. So we're not going to touch those here, but if you just want to add something in and then change it from there, you can go to your factory presets and you can set everything, and this will change it all. In fact, if we wanted to say, give us the 80s era here, we can undo it afterwards if we add this preset, but let's just see what it will do out of the box here if we tap this one. There you go. So the 80s era one's saying it wants to really hype up the top end and drop down the low a little bit there, which is probably more for that sort of enhancing that synth sound and that real sort of cracky snare sound. Let's just see what this would sound like with the suggested 80s era settings.
Time that flies and you're out of here. One long pint and you disappear.
So it's not bad, yeah, but to my ears, it's just a little bit too intense. So if we hit undo on that one, it'll take it back to what we've got set there, and then this is what we've dialed in.
Here you're done. 1.21.
Which I just feel is a little bit more balanced here. It's a little bit more in the pocket there. Let's take a look at the stereo imager here. So we can do the same sort of thing with our stereo image. We've got the amount of width that we have here. You can make it super narrow or super wide, and then we've got our panning. So we can actually change where we put all these frequencies. So once again, it is like having a pan and having a width control, but being able to do it at 3 different settings here. So you've got 100% width there, you've got 100% width there, and you've got all of that going on there. So let's have a play here and see what this actually does. So we're going to turn off our mids and our treble, and we'll just leave the bass on here, and we'll have a look at what this actually does with our width and our panning and the amount that we actually increase here. So we'll come to a section here around our chorus and hit play, and then we'll just twiddle some knobs and see what happens.
Time that flies when you're having fun. Sometimes feels you're the only one who knows how heavy it feels. Time that flies and you're out of here.
So you can hear there with our bass sounds, or at least with our sub bass, and if we move this across, in fact, let's make it everything below 400 hertz, because you'll be able to hear it a bit more. As we turn up this width, you can hear that the kick drum and the bass instruments will go a lot wider. Let's show this again.
One long pine and you disappear, you're done. 1.21.
Now, if you want to use that as an effect, that's totally cool. But for our purposes here, we tend to want that to be, if anything, at the 100% or even a little bit more narrow, because I tend to want the bass, especially in a song like this, to be right down the middle. So let's make this everything under, say, 300 hertz, and we're just going to leave it. We're going to leave it at, in fact, we'll leave it even less. Let's put this at like 90% there. And our panning, of course, right in the middle. Now, if we wanted to adjust our panning, we could do this. And this, again, would give you a bit of a weird effect, because you probably don't want your bass on one side or the other. But let's just take a listen to what it does.
Need to find my mom and dad and get them to the fish under the sea dance.
That could be quite a cool effect. And now I don't know if you can actually pan, if you can automate the panning of your bass, but it could be a quite interesting effect if you could. So let's jump into the mid-range, shall we now? So we'll leave that as it is with just a little bit narrower. Let's listen to our mid-range now. Let's do everything up to, yeah, maybe 1.5. So for everything from 300 hertz to 1.5 kilohertz here. And we'll take a look. I don't think we could solo just the sound of this, though. That would be kind of cool if we could hear just what we're doing to that band, like we can do in things like Final Touch, but I don't think we can here. So let's hit play on this one, and we'll turn up and then play with the width of our mid-range.
Before we all fade away. Great Scott, this is gonna be tough. The dark squad is pretty rough, 'cause we need
again, because most of our mid-range instruments are things like vocals and things like our sort of keyboard sounds, we probably don't want those to be too wide. So maybe you'd add a little width. So maybe we'd put this like 110% just to give it a little width there like this.
A lightning bolt, but my girlfriend had red.
And when you're adding a bit of width, the reason that you can adjust this is that you may want to give it a little bit more volume there as well at the same time. So that's what we've got there. Now, the one thing that I might want to add a bit of stereo width to is these sort of more treble sounds. So some of those higher end sounds that are kind of like the harmonics of some of those synth sounds, they might actually sound pretty cool being a little bit wider. So we won't change the volume of these yet, but let's just play around with the width here of these high level instruments that we have.
Turn her number for me, and I now know my density. Time that flies and it's time to run. Sometimes feels you're the only one who knows.
So once again, less is more when it comes to this sort of stuff. You don't want to go nuts with it. You probably want to put it somewhere around that mark there. So let's now turn this off again. We'll do the do no harm test here, and we'll come back to our chorus and play through here. We'll leave it off, we'll turn it on and back off, and just do some quick A/B testing here.
Time that flies when you're having fun. Sometimes feels you're the only one who knows how heavy it feels.
And again, to me, with these two on now, with our multiband compressor and our stereo imager, we're just getting just breathing a little more life into the tune. I think so. So let's move to our final step here, which is the Loudness Maximizer. Now, at the moment, we've got it off here. This is basically, it's kind of like your limiter. This is almost like the brick wall limiter, even though we do have a limiter that we're going to use right at the end of our chain, just to make sure that we're not going over 0 dB. So this is where we can start driving things up a little bit, keeping an eye on our output meter, and making sure we're not overcooking it. So let's come here into our second verse, shall we? And hit play on this one, and we'll just drive this up to the point where we think it's going to work for this mix.
Find my mom and dad and get them to the fish under the sea dance before we all fade away. Great Scott, this is gonna be tough. The dog squad is pretty rough cause we need.
So I think sitting in around about there is going to be pretty cool, yeah? So we've got it there, and it's hitting around 0 dB. It's going a little bit over there, but that's where we can, because this is designed for mastering, I'm hoping that it's not going to actually do any sort of digital clipping. We can turn soft clip on, I guess, if we're concerned about that.
A lightning bolt, but my girl.
But just listening to it, and again, using my ears and not my eyes, it's sounding okay there, but we can always experiment with this and maybe bring it back down a little bit later. So there you go. There's the multiband compressor, stereo imager, and Loudness Maximizer. If we go back, and we go back to our effects, like so. That's not probably how you should do it. So here we are, we're back into our master. We can now go to this brick wall limiter, and this is what we were looking at before. We can open this one up, and the release is how quickly it's going to actually release when it actually is limiting. So the limiter here, we want the threshold to be where we want it to limit up to, and then we want the release. So we'll put minus 0.2 there, and then release is how quickly we want it to release when it is actually doing that limiting. So if a quicker release means that the second that the volume comes down below that, it's going to stop the limiter. Having it up higher just means that it's going to release it a little bit more slowly. We probably want it quicker for a master for a track like this. So we'll bring it down here to maybe something around 50 milliseconds. We'll try this, and then we can experiment. So we'll bring it onto there. We've got it to pushing to 0.2 dB. There's our input level that's going to come in. The reduction will be shown here, and then our output level will be here. So let's hit play on this one.
Friend had red, turn her number for me, and I now know my density. Time that flies and it's time to run.
So what this is actually showing me here is that we're not even getting up to that 0.2 dB overall. So we can probably go a little bit louder with our limit, because at the moment it will be more of a sort of bouncy waveform here. We don't want it to be a complete sausage in that it's not going to have any dynamic range, but it is a dancey, synthy kind of song. So we do want to have a little bit of that going on here. So if we come back, I've got to try and remember how to actually get back to this section without going through all that. I don't quite know yet. Let's hit the master strip here and come back in here to this Loudness Maximizer, and let's just turn up the optimization, give it a bit more pump, just so that we can see what that looks like in our brick wall limiter. So we'll come back here.
When you're having fun, sometimes feels you're the only one who knows how heavy it feels.
So we've got a bit more. Quite a bit more. We've got a bit more going on there. We'll come back to here. We'll go back into this one and to our brick wall. Now let's see what this is doing now that we've turned that up a little bit.
Time that flies and you're out of here. One long pine and you disappear. You're done.
We're still not getting much reduction there at all, are we? If we bring this down, let's just say we wanted to master this right down at 0.6 dB, then what we should see is, because we're up at like -1 and other settings there, we should see a little more reduction here.
1.21. Need to find my mom and dad.
Can you hear that pumping that's starting to come in there? That's being caused by the limiting. By every time it kicks in, it's bringing it up and down. Now, to reduce the pumping, we can stretch out the release time a little bit, but because we're limiting all the way up here, we want to be right up here at, say, 0.2, minus 0.2, it's not actually going to do that much reduction. And it may just mean that we've mastered it. Part of the other mastering we've done is put it right up to that 0 dB. What I tend to do from here is export it, check it in audio share, and then see what it looks like. Again, we want to be using our ears, not our eyes, but it is an option that we have here. So let's come in and play.
Need to find my mom and dad and get them to the fish under the sea dance before we all fade away.
So that's sounding about right to me. We've got enough loudness in there, but we've also got enough dynamic range. So let's now export this and then see what it looks like and sounds like out here in audio share. So it's my first time exporting a track. We're going to go to media. We've got our track set here and we're going to export. So we're going to go share and we're going to share, hit the more button here. It's got, whoops, sorry, we've shared the project there. I think we've done the wrong thing. Yeah, we have. We've shared the project. This is where we have to remember how to actually do this. Mix down is what we want, isn't it? We want to actually create a mix down of this track. So here we go. Create mix down. This is better. 1.21. We'll do this. 1.21 and we'll call it Master 1. And then it'll be 2 and 3 and 4 and 27 and final mix and then final mix actual and then final master actual really this time. All right. Now I've been told that we don't want to include the effect tail. We do want to mix down between the locators because we've set our locators to be the track there. We don't want to normalize because we've already mastered this track. We want it to be a wave file and everything else looks all good. So let's hit the start mix down button. And this is going to mix our track, mix it down, give us a wave file of all the tracks together. This is exciting because this is the first time that we're going to see this as an actual individual wave file, because the beauty of Cubasis is that we've got it all here in the one platform. We can do everything together and we don't actually have to export it. So we'll wait for this to finish exporting and then we'll jump into audio share and take a look. Okay, that seems to be done. 1.21 master 1. This is our master file. Now, how do I actually send it somewhere? That's a good question. Do we hit the share button here? I think so. So let's try this. We hit share. We'll send it to audio share because Cubasis has great audio share integration. It's importing the audio there and drum roll please, there it is. So yeah, we've mastered this one pretty hard. Yeah, you can see there that we don't have a whole lot of dynamic range in here. We really did push it hard. Like the first version I did with that maximizer turned down a bit would have been a little bit different to this. This one, we've got this result here. Let's hit the play button and take a listen to it, shall we? mean, it's sounding pretty good. It's probably a little bit overcooked. Will this be the very final version? Maybe, maybe not. Let's come down here to the end of this bridge section where it goes from our bridge back into our final chorus here.
Love it. Time that flies and it's time to run. Sometimes feels.
It's definitely got quite a bit of power there, doesn't it? Just to compare and contrast, why don't we, the final thing we'll do here is we'll jump back into Cubasis, like so, and we'll turn off the mastering that we did there, and we'll export this without any of that. So if we go to our mixer here, and we're here in our master fader, we'll turn off the master strip and the brick wall limiter, and then we'll go back to our media, and we will re-mix down. We'll create a new mix down, and this time we'll call it 1.21, and we'll just call this final mix, because this is going to be our one without mastering. We'll start the mix down. Now, we'll take a little time to do this again because it does have to mix all those tracks again without the mastering processing. So we'll let this finish up and then we'll take a look at this one and compare it in Audio Share. So we're done again. There's our final mix version. Once again, we can share it. We'll hit Audio Share. We'll bring it on across into Audio Share. There you go. So you can see the very big difference here between your final mix and your final master. So here's what our mix sounds like. Not bad, yeah, but lacking a little bit of life. Here's our master. Now, did I go a little bit too far in this one to kind of prove what you can do with Cubasis and mastering? Yeah, probably. So my job here, if I choose to accept it, and I will, is to go back into here and tweak some of these mastering settings so that we get somewhere between those two. We don't want it to have all of that room up the top there and all that headroom. It's not going to be at a competitive volume with other tracks, but we don't want it to be quite as insane as the second version there, because that is a little bit too much for, even for a song like this. There's not a whole lot of life there. We need a bit more dynamic range in this final master, but there you go. Pretty darn cool, yeah? So we've got all of that right here in our mixer. We can use our master here to actually add in our mastering effects. We can tweak those. That master strip is super cool, very simple, but very effective with our multi-band compressor, our stereo imager, and our loudness maximizer in there as well. I hope you found this useful, and I hope you found this series useful. From here, we are going to keep tweaking this one. We are going to go and release this, but I was going to hope to release it by the end of April. It's probably going to be just a little bit into May here now, but do keep an eye on the channel, and we will be back to finish this one off very soon. Time sure does McFly when you're having fun. Hope you enjoyed this one. I'll see you on the next one.